Good afternoon. My name is Bahman Yazdanfar, and this is Voters Echo, a weekly program to bring to you Torontonian, Ontarian, Canadian, different perspectives, different views, different ideas from the different point of views of the candidates, citizens, and so on, to give you better chance to understand your options when you go to the ballot box this year, as well as any other election, whether it is municipal, provincial, or federal, such as this year. A couple of disclaimer: I am under payroll of no individual, no entity, no union, no political party, or no third party. I am doing it on my own. I put my own time and effort to produce this program. The timing for this program is donated by Dr. James Sears, which incidentally he registered as an independent candidate for the riding of Beaches in East York, and I wish him good luck in his campaign. I don't endorse any candidates in my program or their affiliated party. It is your job as a voters, as an electorate, to choose, to make your decision on your own, and I hope you go and vote based on the proper information you gather either through this program or similar program, online or otherwise. Now, without further ado, I ask my guest to introduce himself. But today I have a very special guest. Is not just only a candidate, but also is my friend and my colleague as well. So, John, will you please, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you first, and thank you for becoming a candidate. It has been long overdue for the federal government, federal election. Can you introduce for our audience your full name and a little bit of your background?
Absolutely, but first, thank you for acknowledging that you're my friend and
Oh,
colleague.
yes, I know. In the past, I failed to do that properly because I'm handicapped in English.
Well, thank you anyway. Yeah, so my name is John Richardson. I am a candidate in the riding of Toronto Danforth, where I have lived for, my God, over 30 years. And I am a candidate this year for the Progressive Canadian Party, which is the party that was formed in 2004 by Sinclair Stevens and other former members of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you very much. Well, because I know we know each other, what, over 8 years now, something.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that, Bauman, and do you remember how we met?
Oh, of course. We both of us running originally as an independent candidate in Toronto Danforth.
That's right. We ran into each other on the street
for the signature taking.
Absolutely, and Bauman did give me his signature.
And you gave mine, which was recognized by your returning officer.
Exactly. So it was one of those win-win situations, and I think we appeared once in a debate together.
Yeah. Yes.
After
yes,
that,
yes,
was that the one
yes.
Jack Layton never showed up?
Jack
at?
Layton didn't show up. It was the only all-candidate.
Right.
debate.
Peter Talmans was a victim.
Is trying to replace him,
right.
Which was voted out, of course.
Yes, I remember that.
But by the way, that year I ended up to run just under the flag of Canadian Action Party because I couldn't find an auditor on time, and I didn't know the rules of the and ropes of the game.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, both of us have run as independents a lot, and it's a tough road. I mean, to run as an independent or one of these small party candidates. I mean.
Which brings me to my first question: why progressive Canadian, and why now? Why switch from the? You could have run as an independent.
Right. So why did I not run as an independent this time? Well, the answer is this: that as well as as you know, I've been a long-time supporter of independent candidates, including you over the years, Bauman. But I've also been a supporter in general way of parties that are supporters of independent candidates and allow independent candidates sort of into the fold. And as you know, there are two kinds of parties, unregistered and registered. So, I mean, I would support an unregistered party that supports independents, like, for example, Steve Gary's Democracy Party of Canada, which you can find at democrat.ca, and Sinclair Stevens' Progressive Canadian Party, which is at pcparty.org. Which is also a party that supports and endorses independent candidates. And as you know, because you were a participant in these discussions, one of the things that I had and I suppose continue to consider is the possibility of drawing together a coalition, if you will.
Like I did in the provincial.
Yeah,
like
your Canadians' Choice Party, exactly,
yes.
a coalition
Yeah.
of independent candidates. And by independent candidate, what I mean is a candidate that views his or her role as to represent the people in the riding and not to be somehow just beholden, to party interests. So that's I think, the key.
Progressive Canadian is one of those parties that you have, as a candidate, have a complete freedom of the choice based on your riding's needs.
Yeah. I mean, it's a party that supports independence, supports individual ridings, and encourages candidates to be responsive to the interests of the riding, within reason. I mean, I certainly support the overall objectives and views of the Progressive Canadian Party, which is, pretty basic stuff.
No, I understand. They say, so isn't it supposed to be originally always supposed to be like that from perspective of the Westminster parliamentary system?
Well, I mean, we've had this discussion before. It's probably a great moment to update it because, I mean, never has the sort of coercive nature of the mainstream parties over the candidates been as great as it is now. But, in the early days, Parliament was made up of individual candidates and parliamentarians, and the individual members, if you will, certainly predated the political parties. Now, granted, the political parties have been around for a long, long time, as you know. But I mean, what is a political party other than just a voting coalition, if you will? So you start out with these individual candidates who are, in Parliament, and on the one hand, I mean, I'm sure you're getting better riding representation. It's probably a better form of representative democracy. Realistically, it probably is harder to get things done. It's kind of like Toronto City Council, where everybody can, do what they want. So gradually the parties formed, and really they were voting coalitions. And then gradually those voting coalitions became so predictable that they carved out their own identities, and their ancestors evolved into names that you might perhaps recognize today, like the Liberal Party and the NDP. Yeah. Well, the Conservative Party of Canada is actually a very, very young party because that resulted from the takeover, the merger. You can see it as a takeover, as a merger of the Alliance and the Progressive Conservative Party of Brian Mulroney.
And Reform.
Yeah, that group. Yeah. Well, what really is the Preston Manning Party, yes, right? Coming out of Western Canada.
Yeah, Harper used to be one of his assistants, if I'm not wrong. He was very close associate of the Preston Manning.
I don't know, but I do remember seeing Preston Manning speak. Would have been the late '80s, I think. One of these lunches at the Royal York Hotel. And at that time, he was regarded as this sort of, wacko fringe candidate, from Western Canada. But, after I heard him speak, I commented to the person at the table, said, this guy's definitely going to be prime minister. I have no doubt about it. And Stephen Harper is that. Okay, maybe not. He's a direct descendant.
Manifestation of that.
Yeah, but a different kind of person, altogether. But really the Preston Manning Party, interestingly enough, reached full maturity. The year, and I don't remember the exact year, that Preston Manning got turfed out of the leadership role. Because at that point, the very fact that they were able to replace him with, I believe it was Stockwell Day at the time.
Yes, I remember that.
Seemed to me to be evidence that the party itself had evolved to the point where it had grown beyond Preston Manning. It had an identity of its own. And in a sense, it was necessary, I believe, for Preston Manning to lose the leadership of the party, for the party to be eventually grow bigger and become the government. So what you're looking at today, the Conservative Party of Canada, I view as Preston Manning's Reform Party.
But Stockwell didn't last long neither, did he?
No, he didn't, and I don't remember very much about Stockwell Day at all.
I remember only one shot he had with the scuba diving.
Oh, the water skiing. That's right. He was water skiing around.
But having said that, That brings it. That is very good to know about this brief history, because you see that even if a party starts with a noble idea and a very individualistic kind of the point of view, all of a sudden it can be grabbed out of your hand, and party politics take over of the people's politics.
Yes.
Isn't it the case that it happened, and we witnessed that in our modern time? And subsequently come and take over the old conservative party and so on.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very, very big problem. And of course, you know, in the Western world, we use democracy as a code word for, you know, everything's okay in politics. Or, you know, you go back to, was it, I believe, Winston Churchill, who said that, you know, democracy was the worst form of government except for all the other forms of government. I think it really depends what you mean by democracy. You know, there are many, many different kinds of democracies. I mean, Westminster democracies, you know, by that I mean the ones that, you know, evolved from, you know, Britain, differ greatly among themselves, and, you know, there are all kinds of other democracies. But I think, unfortunately, that what a democracy is in 2015 in the world today, it's a democracy if somehow you can vote.
So it's become just electoral process.
I think that's what it is. I do not regard North America as particularly democratic at all.
You are not alone in this.
Who could have known, Bauman? But you know, the reason that I see it that way, or one of the reasons, is that although people have the right to vote, mostly, the problem is there's nobody to vote for. I mean, the truth is that, you know, if you were to look at, you know, this campaign that's going on in Canada, for example, last night I saw a bit on the internet of this thing going on at the Munn Center.
It's just a show.
Yeah,
dog and pony show.
But let's say that, you know, you were to walk around to a bunch of Canadian families and say, you know, give them a list of 35 people and say, pick the ones that, you know, you think would be the best political leaders. I have very serious doubts as to whether any one of those three, you know, would come to mind particularly.
But if you give 3 logos,
well, the logos, yeah. It's, no, you know, you make an important point, because the parties have become so entrenched in the modern world. And I don't mean just in Canada, in the United States, and, you know, and all these other so-called democracies, that regrettably, people, I think, have a tendency to think of themselves as voting for parties. So, you know, I live in Toronto Danforth. All right. What kind of place is Toronto Danforth? Actually, it's a great place to live. Well, you live in Toronto
Yes,
Danforth.
I do.
Yeah, we both live in Toronto Danforth. Yeah, so you know it's a great place to live. But, I mean, you've got
we live in different municipal districts, but
we
both
live
are in Toronto Danforth.
It's a big riding,
Yeah.
but, you know, the point is that it's got a tremendous range of people, and it's incredibly diverse, I mean, both sociologically and economically.
That's correct.
But yet, I think that there's a perception that Toronto Danforth is either NDP or Liberal or something, you know, or something like that.
NDP for last, what, 15 years?
Well, it's been
2004?
NDP federally since Jack Layton.
So it's 2003,
Right?
2004.
Yeah, well, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Before that, God, I'm embarrassed, I can't remember his name. I mean, there was a very strong Liberal NP in that riding, but people see voting in a habitual way, you know, so they say, well, you know, my parents voted NDP, so either I will or I won't, depending on, you know, your view of, you know, your parents. But voting is very, very habitual.
So that doesn't make doesn't make an individual, any citizen, to some extent concerned about electing people who make the decision on our behalf, because of lack of information or lack of knowledge or uninformed voting system.
Almost all voting is uninformed, that is for sure.
And half of them don't even vote.
And half of them don't even vote. I mean, actually, you know, I was talking about democracy. I said, well, one of the problems is there's nobody to vote for. But I mean, either equally or a close number two would be the fact that nobody votes.
Because they don't think that their voice has any...
Yeah, and of course, this is what I would call a first world problem. I mean, as we sit here today, people are being massacred in parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading, for example, about the whole this whole situation in Syria, and and we sit here, talking about, well, people don't want to vote, this sort of thing.
Well, I think not only philosophically, but practically, it is important because if they don't want to vote and uninformed voters go and elect someone or few group of people to make decision on behalf of the whole population that make impact in their daily life, I don't think it is far from that massacre neither, because a lot of people die on the street or because of the illnesses that they don't get treated properly because of the policies. I mean, it's not bloodshed on the street or on the desert, but nevertheless, it impacts the livelihood of people.
Well, I do think that a lack of interest and a lack of commitment to the democratic process affects everybody negatively. It's just a question of how.
How? That's correct. And it's a good segue because as you mentioned, I live in the same riding. I send invitation to all candidates. By the way, I have sent multiple invitation to more than 200 candidates within the 56 ridings, GTA and the vicinity, or not suburb, but vicinity, and that they could be to the studio within 1 hour and 10 minutes or so. And many of them either declined or they refused or they didn't answer. Anyhow. But
what do you make of that?
Yeah, and I'm coming down to the good example of our Danforth, and I want to have your take on it. We have Craig Scott as our MP or incumbent, which I ran in the by-election of the 2012.
You ran against him in 2012.
Not again. I ran for my
you ran. You ran and he ran. You weren't running against him. You were
because he was not. He was new nominee. And anyhow, I sent 3 Twitter feed to them. I didn't get any answer. And funny thing is, on Friday night, I ran to him on the street just by accident about 9:30. And we say hi, and I explain how come I didn't get any answer. She acknowledged she didn't know about my invitations. I said, I am going to send you an invitation. I sent invitation. I followed up following day, which was Saturday. Again, when they said they didn't receive it, I asked for another email address. I sent again, and finally they acknowledged, yes, we received it. And 2 hours later, I received an email, oh, he's very busy. And following Sunday, I was passing by, going to the library, and I saw a group of people gathering in his office. I walked in, and within 2 minutes, I talked to him, and he still told me that I didn't receive it.
Yeah.
And I asked him, which I'm bringing to the question, and I asked him, how come so-and-so acknowledged that? He said, well, my campaign manager, which brings me to this question. If our candidates from the mainstream party, let's assume for a moment these 3 mainstream parties are the only answer to our questions or concerns.
They're the key to our survival and growth and prosperity. Yes.
If these candidates do not have any authority to do anything or making any decision while they are campaigning for their candidate, what hope the constituents or electorate can have when they get elected to follow their promises?
Absolutely no hope at all. I mean, that's the reason why, I've been such a long time vocal supporter of independent candidates. Is precisely because the the MPs that are what I would call the main party MPs. Well, you know who they are: the Liberals, Conservatives, and the NDP.
Liberals even didn't accept it.
Oh, I'm not at all surprised. I mean, their job is to do what the party leader says. Party leader says jump; they're just supposed to say how high. I mean, they have very little. It really doesn't even matter what they think. I mean, my impression of them is that. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't good ones. I mean. For the record, I mean, I think I I regard Craig Scott positively. I think he's a decent MP, and I think for the most part, I mean, I think that he's motivated. His being in politics is for the right reasons, okay? But nevertheless,
he doesn't have the control over his own campaign.
No, he doesn't have control, I think, over much of anything. I mean, that's what a main party candidate is. I mean, it's just a mechanism to vote for the party leader of the party. Now, that's the bottom line truth for every one of them. It doesn't mean you can't have ones that are good. I mean, I think that.
Oh, I had people from the Liberal Party in this show on the same chair that you are sitting right now.
This chair, I'm sitting in a
exactly
chair.
on the chair.
Oh, you should have told me that.
Yeah, no, I had John McKay, 18 years MP from the Scarborough was there.
Mm-hmm.
I had Selina Chauvin, good MP, good candidate from Liberal Party sitting there. I had MPP Sherry DiNovo sitting there. So there are people who are willing to come to the show and talk and expose them. I don't get personal in my shows, and I'm just focusing on the issues. But what I'm saying is, when you come to the campaign, especially long campaign like this one, 3 mainstream parties, they don't even want to touch you. There is only 2 possibilities. Either they don't have the confidence of their own knowledge, or they are being told not to.
Well, no, you see the world in 2 binary of a manner, or perhaps both. You know, both is also a possibility.
And what is the maximum damage that one could have by being for 1 hour to a show that has very limited audience? So this many people are. I don't think they, as you correctly put it, it is a combination of both. I think they don't have confidence on their own abilities to express themselves.
Well, I mean, I think realistically, some do and some don't. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is that, the mainstream parties have to run a candidate in every riding, pretty much, and I think that depending on the party, I mean, I think there are political parties that do not regard independent thinking on the part of candidates as a good thing. So what that means is that you're looking for people who are willing to kind of, play by a rule book, a script. And I think that, I mean, my impression, and I don't know this to be true for sure, my impression, though, over the years and things I've read, is that many candidates, many main party candidates would require permission of party central, so to speak, to do a debate or a debate isn't a debate, a conversation.
Conversation, yes.
Like we're having today. So I suppose that the party would ask itself a simple question: will it benefit the party? The issue is not will it benefit the candidate. The issue is not will it benefit the riding. The issue is will it benefit the party, right? And unless you're the Monk debate or, something run by the Globe and Mail, I think that, where they know the moderators,
Mm-hmm.
right, and they, I believe, can agree collectively on who the moderators are, I think that this type of forum can be a dangerous thing.
Are you referring to last night's debate, or are you referring
This
to
sort of thing,
this sort of thing, okay.
These sort of impromptu, informal things where, I mean, nobody, gets to sit down with you in advance and say, what are the questions, and, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that's an overly comfortable situation for a certain type of person, or for a party that has, a very, very rigid message. But whatever the reason is, they should be showing up. I mean, they should, I think, try to interact with the community in every medium that they can. I mean,
well,
that would be my thought.
that brings me to the following question regarding the electorate. Now, if electorate, for instance, one of the, let's say, this show could be a little bit is from perspective of the feasibility, it's not a cup of tea for the campaign manager of one of these major political parties, because they say, okay, we need to have, let's say, 5,000 audience. This show has 500 audience, so it's not feasible. I could understand if they say that. But when we go to the...
But doesn't it stay up on YouTube for a long time?
Oh, yeah, yes, I understand. What I'm saying is if it is their set of their mindset is like that, Okay, let's see. Then why they don't invite all candidates to the local debates?
Yeah, that
I give you an example. Right now, I was informed a couple of days ago that Mr. James Sears, who donated the time out of his credit with that channel to me.
he's on Beaches Danforth.
He Beaches Danforth, and tonight there is a debate, and he was not invited. Then yesterday I received a phone call from probably you know this gentleman, Leslie Borey, who is independent candidate, 3 hours drive from here.
Where's he running?
I forgot the name. It's long name. Norfolk.
Okay, he's running a long way.
It is close to the Lake Erie. And even though that place is not urban, what is that? Urban area. I mean, he was not invited to the debate neither.
Yeah, this is a gigantic problem, and as you know, over the years in Toronto Danforth, and I created this thing, with your help. Thank you. Called Toronto Danforth Debates, where I've organized these debates. Largely for the purpose of ensuring that all candidates get to participate in debates. So every debate that I run, everybody gets invited. And for the most part, they will show up. But it's a very, very serious problem, because what it means is that the rules of engagement for political campaigns are very much controlled by media. For example, we have these Rogers debates, or community associations,
which they have interest in one way or another.
Yeah, and the effect is that they exclude a lot of candidates, particularly independents. And my experience. You run. Between the two of us, we probably run 14, 15 times.
I don't know. I ran at least 5-6 times.
Yeah. Well, I have
4 or 5 times.
We run a number of times, but and I have.
I can say 6 times for sure I ran.
Yeah. So I've appeared in a lot of debates, and my experience of them is that the independent candidates are usually much better candidates. They're forced to defend their positions. They're forced to have positions. They don't read out of a party,
manifesto.
Party manifesto. That sort of thing. My sense is that I think that, and then of course, I think it's one thing to exclude candidates from private debates. Okay, I don't like it, but I don't have a problem with that because I respect private property. But what about the problem of debates taking place in either public forums or buildings, for example, schools that are publicly funded?
I had the same experience in by-election 2013. I don't know if you recall. There was a school property on Jarvis or somewhere like that.
Yes, I do. Yeah. I do, in fact, remember that. And I think that there were a couple of independents who were there protesting there.
Yes, but they were escorted out by police.
Yeah, well, they should not have been escorted out. My view of this is that any debate that takes place on public property, that is, property that's funded by the public, whether it's rented privately or not, should not be able to exclude any candidate who's on the ballot from the debate. And they are excluding them. There's no question about it. It's completely wrong. It's antithetical to the fundamental principles of democracy. What is democracy about? We've talked about it includes voting. It includes having candidates to be able to vote for, but certainly it must include a climate where at least there's no obstruction to getting the message out, right? If an independent candidate, or if any candidate, as under the Elections Act, has the right to get into apartment buildings, to canvass and that sort of thing.
Federally, yes.
Then, using that principle, how or why should a candidate be excluded from a political debate? Wouldn't it be better just to require that for any debate all candidates have to be invited?
Well, not to mention that those local those local debates usually attracts maybe maximum of a couple hundred people, which most of them are supporters and entourage of the three mainstream parties.
They're clearly there to support and make noise for their party.
So in any given local debate, either it's provincial or federal, and let's assume there is 300 people in the hall, maybe only 70 or 80 of them are really has nothing to do with the three mainstream parties. So really the impact of having the independent candidate or fringe party candidates there is very minimal. But still, that is why earlier I mentioned, I think it's lack of confidence of the candidates from mainstream parties that they don't want to include the other candidates.
It may be that in some cases. I don't think it generally is. I think it's just basically to, restrict competition. Like you'll recall in 2012 in that by-election that Craig Scott ultimately won, that you were a candidate. I organized as part of the Toronto Danforth debates.
15th of March 2012.
That debate where, I think we had, I don't remember the numbers, but everybody was
invited. Because it was 4 days before election day, that is why I remember the date.
Yeah, but we had like 10 or 11 candidates at the debate, and what I thought was very interesting about it was that the inclusion of all those candidates made it very, very clear that there was nothing special at all about those, those main party candidates, nothing at all. On
the contrary, it makes them very inefficient.
I'm not so sure that somebody watching that would say that they were better candidates at all. My personal. Thanks. My experience with this is that the main party candidates usually are not the best candidates. But that was, and this is on YouTube. You can Google it and find it. But if you were to see that debate, I think you could see that the effect of it was that not only were the mainstream party candidates the best candidates, but also how the inclusion of all the candidates, dramatically enhanced, the event and the democratic process and all that kind of stuff. So, absolutely. And another point that I would make is this, that, I don't know if this is true or not, but the simple fact of the matter, an anecdotal observation, is that, with the Harper government, very often conservative candidates do not appear at debates.
Yes, I think it is part of their strategy, because in 2011 they did the same thing.
Well, one wonders, what's going on there. Now, let me ask you a question. We're talking about principles of democracy. Do you think that a principle of democracy would include that a registered political party has to make their candidates available at debates?
Of course, either if you are using the Elections Act, and if you are registering, let's say this year, 338 candidates, you should provide them available to their constituents for all sorts of the question and answer during the campaign period.
I would think so.
Well, it is a common sense, but we don't. It's not as common as we thought it would be. Chris, may I give you a link and you see if you can find it and play just 20 seconds of this footage? Okay. Is it possible? Yeah. You see, because when you look at the name democracy, ruled by people, which first of all many people maybe argue the idea of majority should not do that or not, but we don't even have majority. We have majority government, but not by majority of the voters.
Well,
this one. And minute 8:50.
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of democracy you're talking about. I sense that you're talking about the first past the post system.
No, I'm not talking about the process of electoral process. What I'm saying is, if you call any society a democratic society, and let's say collectively all people agreed that 50 plus 1 has the right to give mandate to group of people to tell the rest to do. But we don't even have that 50+1 because of the first past the post system, of course. But we don't even have that. We have a majority government for the last 5 years with for less than 18% of the eligible voters in Canada.
18% of the eligible, that's right, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you're absolutely right, and it's, I mean, it would seem to me that election reform is absolutely necessary. You know, or perhaps what we could call democratic reform or something like that, because, but the real democracy deficit is the fact that such a high percentage of people don't vote, right? I mean, how can you really have a, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what democracy is. You know, we're talking about this today, and we're, you know, kind of batting this around a bit about some things that it might include. But I mean, if you were, you know, if you walked up to a street corner, you know, with a bunch of people having coffee, you didn't know very much about the political process, and if you were to ask them a question, do you think that a government that was elected by only 18% of the people, do you think that's very democratic?
No, of course not. It reminds me of a movie that years back, when I was, I don't recall the name of the movie, but it was Clint Eastwood, and he was in charge of the getting a bunch of unsuitable individuals to make them good soldier. And in one of the scenes, he said they were rebelling against him, and he asked something, and 12, 13 of them said, yes, we agree, we should do this. And Clint Eastwood character said, good, democracy in action, we do what I say you do. So it reminds me of what we have. Regardless of the result of the vote,
yeah,
regardless of all of the protests, regardless of all of the noise that goes on.
Right. Well, I mean, another important aspect of this, though, is that, I mean, let's assume for a minute that you have whatever your concept is of the purest form of democracy in electing MPs, whatever that idea is. But then if you're left with a party system that essentially neuters the individual MPs and makes them completely subject to the whims of the Prime Minister's office, I mean, that's that's an example of how you can have all the democracy in the world, right?
Ends up to office of 2 or 3 people.
You know, but still have that kind of problem. So I mean, you've got, you know, part of the, you know, I feel like we're almost going back to, you know, the 1700s, talking about the origins of the American Constitution. And those were the days then. I mean, my God, a huge democracy deficit there today. But a large part of the structuring of the original American Constitution was to make sure that these kinds of excesses couldn't happen, right? You know, to make sure that, you know, there's sort of an allocation of
to avoid what was happening in Europe, so they try to put a better system. But even that system become distorted.
Well, it certainly is now, because what you have now in the United States, the executive branch, the Obama administration, trying to you know, take over the role of Congress by, you know, ruling by regulation, you know, rather than law. I mean, it's a gigantic
But it's not
problem.
just Obama. Bush did that.
You know what? It is not just any one person.
Yeah,
it is
but
particularly prevalent and visible in the Obama administration.
Maybe we become a little bit more knowledgeable, or we have more access to information that we can see that.
But you know, it's a problem in any
Chris,
case.
you mentioned about 2012 just before I come here. This afternoon, I just looked at something because you're my guest. Can you run that? Is it that 8:50? Can you run that for 1 minute or so?
So we're going to have a trip down memory lane here,
yes.
are we?
I want you to look at that.
Okay.
Just very briefly, I think you can see me like this, and I'm already we're already on the stage above everybody, so I prefer to sit.
The moderator allows that. Please continue.
The question isn't whether to stop globalization. The question should be what kind of you can see me like this, and I'm already we're already on the stage above everybody, so I prefer to sit.
The moderator allows that. Please continue.
The question isn't whether to stop globalization. The question should be what kind of interaction we want with the rest of the world. And there's all kinds of examples of negative economic globalization, but the question, I think, was alluding to what happened.
Thank you. The reason I brought that scene because you mentioned, I knew that probably you come across to tell me about the quality of candidates, because a couple of times you mentioned in the municipal level that the quality of candidates are better because they are running as an independent, mainly, at least in the appearance. But the reason I brought it was the first debate in 2012 that Craig Scott was attending.
Mm-hmm.
And and the audience just asked him, like anyone else, that every one of us stood up so they can view it. He was the only one who sat, and the audience said, stand up. Now, he didn't get up. Again, I don't know the reason. Maybe he felt a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe he felt more comfortable sitting. But the question is not if whether he sat or stood. The question is he became argumentative with the audience who's supposed to vote for him. Now, if it was an independent candidate, wouldn't do that. He wouldn't argue the issue of a standing up or something. He would focus on the issue. Now, I am wondering, when people look at this, maybe if the actual voters look at this scene, this footage, that is a few seconds, say, I'm not going to vote for him, but he got majority of the vote because of the party and because... The point is that all candidates meeting really is irrelevant when it comes to the actual voting because of the few number of the audience. Still, they don't want, for that reason that you just described, to eliminate the competition. Maybe not to be compared with the better quality of the candidates. They want to eliminate, get them out of these debates as much as possible. Am I wrong in that evaluation?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's probably not one answer. I mean, I think that, the candidates themselves do vary. I mean, I think it's human nature to not like competition. I think that the way I think the main party candidates view independents and small party candidates is they sort of clutter up the airwaves, and it makes it harder for people to hear about the main party candidates. In other words,
so they are being treated as a parasites.
Well, they are. They're parasitic on the political process. I mean, I don't think there's any question.
And
about
who
that.
decides on that?
Well, the problem you've got here is these mainstream political parties, in my view, are pretty much at the point where they're just private clubs. You've got riding associations, et cetera. I mean, I'm not saying they're completely undemocratic, but the elections campaigning are really run by the main political parties, their supporters, and the people who work with them all year round. Now, the question is, should it be that way? Well, maybe yes, if they're the ones who are doing all the work, but the problem is that they're really practicing wholesale democracy when retail democracy is the broader group of voters, right? And when the wholesale democracy actually makes it harder for the voters to see what's going on, or when wholesale democracy, the political parties sort of collaborate, to keep independents out of debates. And I believe they do collaborate, because I think it should be the policy of every mainstream political party that they will not ever participate in a debate unless all the candidates are invited. I think that should be the
It is
policy.
wishful thinking because a couple of nights ago I checked the elections Canada website, and in total of the 338 ridings across nation, we have over 1,750 candidates, which out of 1,750 candidates, only three parties, I'm talking about Liberals, Conservative, and the NDP, hold almost all of their own, filled all of their own seats. So it comes to about 1,000. But still it gives you almost 40% of all candidates don't belong to the mainstream party. 40%.
Yeah, they're excluded. They're excluded from the airwaves.
I mean, if it was 10%, I could buy that idea of the wholesale democracy, selling wholesale democracy and retail democracy. But when we have, in spite of the apathy that we have over 750 candidates across the nations that are not belong to these three parties.
And they have to work 1,000 times harder to get on the ballot.
And they don't have the amenities, they don't have the facilities, they don't have resources, they don't have the money or brand of the other. And yet, on top of that, they are being excluded from every small, crammy debate or a little bit of the opportunity so they can express themselves.
Yeah, to put it another way, I mean, the ones that have the most to contribute in terms of public service are also the ones who are mostly excluded. It's as though politics has just become, an exercise where sort of people who are generally irrelevant in life and not particularly public spirited get to form the government.
Yes, sir. Now, in the last 10 to 15 minutes we left, I want to ask you how you plan to run. Do you have any office, campaign office?
Now, why would anybody want a campaign office when all that does is cost money, Bauman?
I don't know. I mean, I walk on Danforth and I see a huge real estate is being occupied with NDP, with the picture of the Craig Scott and Thomas Mulcair on top of the corner of the Pape and Danforth. One would say, okay. I mean, a average voter say, he is a very impressive candidate because he has a bigger office.
I know, I don't doubt that what you're saying is true, but I never would have thought of it that way. Let me tell you what some of my thoughts are on that. I think money is highly overrated in political campaigns. I don't think there's any difference between $0 and $10,000. I don't think there's really much you can do, with 10,000.
But it is the difference between $0 and $100,000.
There's a difference between 0 and 100,000, but there's not a difference between, say, 0 and 10,000.
Yes.
And because independent candidates and small party candidates are very, very limited in what they can get, I personally think that they should not spend their time trying to raise money. I think they should spend their time, going out, talking to people, and doing the best they can to, either be elected, of course, but to build a brand, for themselves down the road. The social media has really, really changed, people's ability to become known. For example, I created I have a number of Twitter things just because I've been involved in things over the years, but one of them would be just at Toronto Danforth. And so one of the things I did was I just created an ongoing Twitter feed of the tweets of all the candidates, right? So it's a lot easier, and people look to social media now, to help with this type of stuff. So, I think it's gotten an awful lot easier. What you have to be careful of, there's the question of how do you run, but there's also the question of how do you survive running in the bureaucracy of a campaign, with Elections Canada and that,
yes,
which you, of course, would know a great deal about.
Yes,
so,
election,
So, there's a huge cost of raising money, right? You have to account for it in certain ways, and and all that. So I think that I think that people should be, small party and independent candidates should be thinking in terms of how to run with very little or no money. And I
Oh,
do
they
think,
do. I think
and
they
I do think it's
but
possible.
how can they really make their marks?
Well, they make their marks by being useful to people, all right, to doing things that matter to people. I mean, the reality is that I don't think that the mainstream political parties matter to anybody. Okay, they're just sort of there, and people understand that these are just your voting options.
It's like a police is there.
Yeah, they're like they're like public utilities, or something like that. I mean, nobody gets overly excited about them, but they serve a certain function. I mean, I think that there is room. I've always thought of this, the idea of either a political party or a coalition of independent candidates, or some kind of combination of those two things, which would provide synergies for in adjoining ridings, for certain types of candidates and that. But I mean, I think what people have to do is when they, maybe they should organize their own debates. I mean, it's astonishing how many.
Well, actually, it's very interesting. My very first guest in this series of show this year was Greg Vezena, the leader of the none of the above party, provincially registered.
Right. You interviewed him on the Independent Nation show
as well.
last
Yes,
year. Yeah.
but in this show, he was my first guest in June, and I know because I spent a lot of time talking to him, with him, and he explained a lot of things. He organized years back, televised debate, and invited all leaders of all registered parties. Interestingly enough, when all of the smaller parties' leaders showed up, these three mainstream parties didn't show up. So which similar thing happened to me in one of my elections, that I was invited to a debate that everybody was invited. When I got there, everybody was there but these three mainstream parties. So it's like a catch-22. Either they don't invite you, or if you want to organize meeting, they don't show up.
Yeah, I get where you're going with that. I've had very, very good in the debates I've organized. I've gotten pretty much full attendance from the mainstream parties. I think that they need to understand that they don't have an option of not showing up. That it can be very, very costly. I mean, it's really a question of.
Why do you put a threat in,
No,
in
not
the
at all.
invitation?
Not at all. Not at all. But the point is simply this: that let's take a situation of. I mean, do you really think that Thomas Mulcair is campaigning against Stephen Harper? No, he's it's obviously against Justin Trudeau. So. I mean, assuming that they haven't conspired.
Nobody campaigning against Harper.
All you need to get is one of them, and the rest are going to be forced to show. So you just kind of break it down that way. I do recognize what you're talking about as a problem. I have not personally had that problem with the debates that I've organized, though. Because I mean, one can create conditions where it's extremely disadvantageous for them.
If from perspective of someone who has done that. If anyone is listening or watching this show right now and say, okay, it's a good idea in my riding, wherever that would be, or that might be, and I want to do that, what kind of the suggestion, can you just very briefly just instruct them how to go about it?
Go about organizing debate?
Yes.
Oh, it's very simple. So you start with a venue.
Okay.
Get a local church or a Legion or something like that that's very inexpensive. Number two, what you do is you set the date. You don't ask them when they're available. You set the date, and you set it far enough in advance. Then what you do is you send out the invitations, and you also, one of the things I always do is I make it clear at the beginning of every debate that I moderate exactly who was invited and who didn't show up.
Okay.
As well.
But from the beginning, when you send the invitation, do you and if you don't get the response,
what you do is you send it out. You say it's an established fact that a debate is going on this day. We presume you're going to attend.
Okay.
and that's basically it.
Probably I should do that. I'm not running, so
I think you should do it. Why not? That's what you do. You say, hi, there's a debate going on in this riding. We presume you will attend.
Okay.
Where you get into trouble is, I think trying to, work around the schedules of a number of candidates. They'll attend. It's interesting to me that, there actually appear to be ridings where they don't have debates anymore.
Yeah, I noticed that. I remember in 2008, of course, we had only one debate, which Jack Layton didn't show up. But in 2011, when I ran in Toronto Centre, there was a number of debates. They tried to exclude me, but after a little bit of persistence, they did. But following by-elections, the last by-election, although by-elections are a little bit trickier, I noticed the number of the debates are less and very limited to the mainstream candidates.
In Toronto Danforth, I don't think they're limited to mainstream candidates anymore. I think that we've had something to do with that, Bauman, over the years.
Well, I hope that tradition goes and someone follows that.
Yeah, because I was invited to a debate yesterday at
you did?
Applewood Community Center.
Okay, Applewood Community Center actually is one of those venues that always been very, very just when it comes to the debate.
Was that right?
Yes, provincially or federally. They always send invitation, and I think a lot of, by the way, the issue of the exclusion of the other candidates rather than the three mainstream parties or four sometimes from debates is systemic issue across the nation. Is not just specific to Toronto Centre or Toronto Danforth.
Oh yeah, no, I'm perfectly aware of that.
But I think any organization who wants to or who is in the process of organizing all candidates debates should follow footsteps of the Apple Group.
You mean invite all candidates all the time?
Yes.
I agree with you totally.
Yeah. If candidates doesn't choose to not to show, that is his or her own prerogative.
Well, it absolutely is, but it also, I think, sends a very, very strong message.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that just because an association or an organization have a room and invites a few people, they should not have the monopoly over the decision making of who should be invited and who shouldn't be.
Well, as I say, I think that this is an area, of possible legislative reform. The way I reason it is, in my simple-minded way, is that, if the principles of democracy in Canada reflect that all candidates should have access to apartment buildings, for example, to canvass or get signatures, then shouldn't the principles of democracy in Canada reflect that any form of debate or any kind of form of sort of public interaction among the candidates should be available to all candidates?
That is what makes sense, but again, they come across from point of view, those are private entities, which it doesn't make sense to me, because even if they are private entities, but the voters are not private entities.
Well, I think it's, you come down to a very, very simple question, and the question is the political process there to serve the parties, or is the political process there to serve the people?
And we know both.
Well, we know that, how the parties would answer the question. They would say, well, it serves the people, but they really think the parties.
Yeah.
And
as once you call it party for the parties only.
That's right. It's just a party for the parties. That's right.
How are we doing, Chris, on the time? 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes. Okay. Do you have any message from your party or from your because you are running on behalf of?
Do I have a message? I suppose I have a message.
Tell you have a 30-second to 60-second time to talk to your constituents.
Well, the first thing I would suggest is that you get out and vote, that you absolutely get out and vote, because if you don't vote, then in my view, you forfeited your right to criticize the government. So one, you're going to get out and vote. Two, you're going to make a distinction between a party and a candidate. So when you get out and vote, you're going to find who you think is the best candidate for the particular riding. And that means somebody who understands and will represent the interests of the riding. And as far as I can see, in Toronto Danforth, there's only one candidate who does that. My name is John Richardson. Vote for me on October the 19th.
Yeah, I hope probably you have my vote, but you know,
Well,
it's
thank you. I should hope so.
But it's secret ballot.
Oh, and I would add, when you vote for me, you tell people you're voting for
Yeah.
me. Absolutely. Don't keep it a secret.
We don't have
Vote
any,
for John,
but by
and
the way,
don't keep it a secret. That's right.
by the way, we don't have any independent candidate in Toronto Danforth, do we?
Well, I'm an independent candidate, of
No,
course.
I mean independent candidate, like being on the ballot as an independent.
That is interesting. In fact, you know, yesterday you told me that we have only about 70 independent candidates in the whole country.
Yes, 73, including independent and not affiliated, which I don't know what is the distinction between that. But out of 1,760 candidates, we have only 60 or 70 of them.
You know, that is absolutely extraordinary, because that means that it's only approximately 1 out of every 5 ridings or something like that. who has a candidate that's not affiliated with a political party.
And that is sad news.
It's very sad. It's very, very bad,
Because for
what it
300
reflects is a complete confusion, and I'll use the word perversion,
Yeah.
of what the democratic process is about. It's not about political parties. It's about serving the interests of the community through individual
it's
candidates.
about the people.
Yeah.
People,
it's crazy. Yeah.
Unfortunately. And we get, you see how time flies? We got on into the end of, first of all, thank you for coming.
Well,
Second, thank you for
inviting me.
engaging with this very interesting conversation, and I wish you best luck, as I wish all of my guests best luck, because I love to see them to get elected, so it's a self-serving kind of.
Bauman, I never wish people luck. I wish them the mental focus and fortitude and physical stamina to succeed.
Well, that is well said.
Luck has nothing
I
to do
don't.
with it.
I can't do that for everyone, because I don't know what they stands for.
Thanks for your luck, but I'd rather have your confidence. And I expect you to vote for me, Bauman.
Well, we will see about that. I will let you know after the results.
I want you to take out full-page ads saying you're voting for me in advance.
As I said, I don't endorse any candidates or any
I'm not saying you
affiliated
should
party.
endorse me. Vote for me.
Okay. Who knows? I will let you know after the election. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Please remember to take part in the electoral process, which is the only thing left of democracy as we know it. Vote for sure, as John said, volunteer, help a candidate, and more importantly, you yourself become a candidate.
Absolutely. Be a candidate.
Thank you and good night.
Thanks.